Preparing for a ServiceNow at Kyndryl interview? You've reached Candy Mentor, and this video is for you. We'll walk through 20 key questions you're likely to face. For each question you'll see a sample answer followed by the key points to cover. Subscribe, like, and share, and drop a topic request in the comments. Question 1. What is ServiceNow, and why is it valuable for Kyndryl's managed services business? ServiceNow is a cloud-based platform that digitizes enterprise workflows, especially IT service management. For Kyndryl, its value comes from standardizing incident, change, request, and asset processes across many client environments. It provides one operational view, automates repetitive work, and supports measurable service-level outcomes. I would also mention integration with monitoring, identity, cloud, and discovery tools. The platform improves consistency, but successful implementations still require process governance, clean data, and thoughtful customization. While answering, explain ServiceNow's cloud platform, workflow automation, IT service management capabilities, operational visibility, integration potential, and how Kyndryl uses standardized processes to deliver scalable client services. Question 2. Explain the difference between an incident, problem, change, and request in ServiceNow. An incident restores service quickly after an interruption, such as a failed application. A problem investigates the underlying cause of recurring or significant incidents. A change modifies a service or configuration, with risk assessment and approvals where required. A request is a standard, user-initiated need, such as software access. These records can connect. An incident may lead to a problem, and its resolution may require a controlled change. Clear categorization prevents misleading metrics. Make sure to cover each record's purpose, urgency versus root cause focus, approval requirements, examples, relationships between records, and how accurate classification improves reporting and operational decision-making. Question 3. How would you design an incident management process in ServiceNow for a Kyndryl client? I would begin by understanding the client's services, support model, business hours, and criticality definitions. Then I would configure intake through portal, email, monitoring, and integrations, followed by consistent categorization and impact urgency prioritization. Assignment rules would route work to the right Kyndryl resolver groups, while SLAs drive escalation. Major incidents need a separate communication and command process. Finally, I would measure resolution time, reassignment, reopen rates, and customer satisfaction to refine the workflow. In your answer, talk about intake channels, categorization, prioritization, assignment groups, SLAs, major incident handling, communications, escalation, knowledge reuse, closure criteria, and continuous improvement metrics. Question 4. What are business rules in ServiceNow, and when should you use them? A business rule is server-side logic that runs when a record is queried, inserted, updated, or deleted. I use it for enforcing data behavior that must apply regardless of the user interface, such as setting fields or preventing invalid updates. Before scripting, I check whether a UI policy, data policy, flow designer action, or validation configuration solves the need more safely. I also control conditions carefully, avoid recursion, and consider transaction performance. Be sure to mention server-side execution, timing options, conditions, current and previous records, data enforcement, performance risks, and why declarative configuration may be preferable to scripting. Question 5. What is the difference between client scripts, UI policies, and data policies? Client scripts run in the browser and handle dynamic behavior, such as populating or validating fields. UI policies declaratively control visibility, mandatory status, and read-only behavior, making them preferable for simple form rules. Data policies enforce data requirements more broadly, including imports and web services, depending on configuration. I use client logic for user experience, but never rely on it for security or authoritative validation. Server-side controls remain essential. While answering, distinguish browser behavior from server enforcement, explain common use cases, discuss execution timing, identify limitations, and describe how to avoid duplicating logic across client and server layers. Question 6. How do you write efficient GlideRecord queries? I start with a precise filter on indexed or selective fields, use add query or encoded queries, and call set limit when I need only a small result set. I avoid querying inside loops and avoid retrieving unnecessary records. For bulk updates, I evaluate whether a controlled server-side operation is appropriate and test it safely. I also consider ACL behavior, query plans, and production scale data rather than judging performance from a small development instance. In your answer, cover indexed fields, encoded queries, query conditions, limiting results, field selection, avoiding queries inside loops, security checks, and testing performance with realistic data volumes. Question 7. What is GlideAjax, and how would you use it in a ServiceNow application? GlideAjax lets a client script request server-side information asynchronously through a client callable script include. For example, when a user selects a configuration item, I could retrieve an owning group without loading unnecessary form data. I pass controlled parameters, validate them server-side, and return only the required value. A callback updates the form after the response arrives. I avoid GlideRecord directly in client scripts because GlideAjax improves security, reuse, and responsiveness. Make sure to explain asynchronous client-to-server communication. Client callable script includes parameter handling, callbacks, avoiding sensitive data exposure, and when a direct client-side solution is better. Question 8. How would you build a catalog item for employee access requests? I would define the requester's business need, required approvals, fulfillment team, and access lifecycle first. The catalog item would use clear variables, reference qualifiers, and conditional questions to collect only relevant information. User criteria would control visibility, while a flow designer flow would create approvals and fulfillment tasks. I would validate inputs, notify stakeholders, and record completion evidence. Testing should cover unauthorized users, rejected approvals, missing data, and duplicate requests. Be sure to mention variables, variable sets, user criteria, catalog UI policies, approvals, fulfillment tasks, flow designer, validation, security, notifications, and fulfillment performance measurements. Question 9. What is Flow Designer, and how does it compare with legacy workflow? Flow Designer provides a low-code way to automate processes using triggers, actions, decisions, and reusable subflows. Compared with legacy workflow, it generally offers better maintainability, integration spokes, and visibility for modern implementations. I would use it for approvals, task creation, notifications, and common integrations. However, I would not migrate blindly. Complex legacy behavior needs assessment, testing, and rollback planning. Monitoring flow contexts and handling failures are as important as designing the happy path. In your answer, discuss triggers, actions, subflows, integrations, maintainability, migration considerations, execution monitoring, error handling, and situations where existing workflow or scripting still requires careful evaluation. Question 10. How would you integrate ServiceNow with an external monitoring or ticketing system? I would first define ownership, event semantics, field mappings, and the source of truth. For modern systems, I would typically use REST with OAuth or another approved credential method. The integration should include a correlation ID, deterministic update behavior, validation, retry handling, and dead letter or error visibility. Monitoring alerts should be deduplicated and intelligently grouped before creating incidents. I would test authentication, timeouts, malformed payloads, replayed messages, and recovery from temporary outages. While answering, cover REST or SOAP choices, authentication, payload mapping, correlation identifiers, ID impotency, retries, error handling, inbound and outbound integrations, logging, and duplicate prevention. Question 11. What are update sets, and what are their limitations? Update sets package many configuration changes so they can move between instances, such as development, test, and production. I review the captured records, complete prerequisites, preview the set, resolve collisions, and test after committing it. They are not a complete data migration mechanism, and some changes or dependencies may not be captured reliably. For repeatable development, I also consider application repository, source control, automated testing, and disciplined deployment pipelines. Make sure to cover configuration migration, captured records, scope, sequencing, collisions, data limitations, preview problems, dependency management, source control considerations, and safer deployment practices. Question 12. How do ACLs work in ServiceNow, and how would you troubleshoot an access issue? ACLs determine whether a user can create, read, write, or delete a table or field. I troubleshoot by confirming the user, roles, table and field hierarchy, conditions, and scripts, then use impersonation and security debugging to identify the failing rule. I distinguish a field being hidden from a record being excluded by a query. My design principle is least privilege. Grant the smallest role or condition needed and test both authorized and unauthorized paths. Be sure to mention table and field ACLs, roles, conditions, scripts, authentication, impersonation, debug tools, least privilege, inheritance, and distinguishing visibility problems from record query problems. Question 13. What is the CMDB, and why is data quality important in ServiceNow operations? The CMDB stores configuration items and their relationships, such as applications, servers, databases, and business services. Reliable relationships support impact analysis, change risk assessment, incident assignment, and service visibility. I would measure completeness, correctness, compliance, and duplicate rates rather than treating population alone as success. Discovery, identification rules, reconciliation, ownership, and governance are essential. A large but inaccurate CMDB can create more operational risk than a smaller, trusted one. In your answer, explain configuration items, relationships, ownership, impact analysis, reconciliation, completeness, correctness, compliance, incident routing, and how poor CMDB data damages automation and reporting. Question 14. How would you use ServiceNow Discovery to populate the CMDB? I would deploy appropriately placed MID servers, validate network connectivity and credentials, then define discovery schedules and ranges based on the client's environment. Discovery uses patterns and identification rules to find devices, applications, and relationships while avoiding duplicates. I would review logs, credential failures, firewall restrictions, and classification results. After discovery, I would validate ownership, see classes, relationships, and reconciliation behavior. Discovery should be governed, not treated as an unattended data dump. While answering, cover MID servers, credentials, probes and patterns, schedules, identification and reconciliation rules, network access, firewall constraints, discovery errors, and validation of resulting relationships. Question 15. What is ServiceNow IntegrationHub, and when would you use spokes? IntegrationHub extends Flow Designer with reusable actions and spokes for systems such as Microsoft, AWS, identity platforms, and collaboration tools. I would use an available spoke when it meets requirements because it reduces custom code and improves maintainability. I still design authentication, data mapping, retries, and failure notifications explicitly. If no spoke fits, I would build a controlled REST action or custom integration, after checking licensing, security, supportability, and operational ownership. Make sure to discuss reusable integration actions, spokes, credentials, REST capabilities, orchestration, error handling, licensing awareness, data transformation, and when custom integration code is justified. Question 16. How would you approach a ServiceNow implementation for a large Kyndryl enterprise client? I would begin with discovery workshops covering business outcomes, current processes, service ownership, integrations, data, and compliance constraints. Then I would prioritize a minimum viable scope and configure out-of-box capabilities before considering customization. A governance board should control architecture, security, data, and upgrades. I would plan migration, integration testing, user acceptance, training, and a phased rollout. After go live, hypercare metrics and feedback would guide continuous improvement without destabilizing the platform. In your answer, talk about discovery workshops, process maturity, stakeholder alignment, out-of-box configuration, governance, migration, integrations, testing, training, phased rollout, and post-go-live support. Question 17. How do you handle ServiceNow upgrades and prevent customizations from becoming technical debt? I treat upgrades as a continuous engineering process rather than a one-time event. Before upgrading, I inventory customizations, review skipped records, assess compatibility, and run automated and business-critical regression tests. I prefer configuration and out-of-box features over unnecessary custom scripts, documenting exceptions with clear ownership. After the upgrade, I validate integrations, security, workflows, reports, and performance. Regular cleanup and stakeholder communication keep technical debt from accumulating between releases. Be sure to mention upgrade previews, skipped records, customization assessment, automated regression testing, scope discipline, release notes, remediation, out-of-box preference, and stakeholder communication. Question 18. Which ServiceNow metrics would you use to evaluate IT service performance? I would combine operational, customer, and improvement metrics. Operational measures include SLA attainment, mean time to acknowledge, mean time to resolve, backlog aging, assignment transfers, and first contact resolution. For change, I would track success rate, incidents caused, and unauthorized changes. Customer satisfaction adds an important outcome perspective. I would segment metrics by service, priority, client, and resolver group, because averages can hide problems. Metrics should drive action, not encourage teams to optimize superficial targets. While answering, cover SLA attainment, mean time to acknowledge and resolve, first call resolution, backlog aging, reassignment, reopen rate, change success, availability, customer satisfaction, and metric interpretation. Question 19. Describe a difficult ServiceNow incident you resolved and how you communicated during it. In one production incident, monitoring showed repeated application failures after a deployment. I confirmed impact, opened a major incident, assigned technical leads, and established updates for business stakeholders. Log comparison identified an incompatible configuration, so we rolled back through the approved change process and verified recovery with monitoring and users. I documented the timeline, linked the change and incident, and led a problem review. The resulting test enhancement prevented similar deployment failures. In your answer, use a structured situation task action result format, explain diagnosis, collaboration, evidence, escalation, stakeholder updates, restoration, root cause, and preventive follow-up. Question 20. How would you demonstrate the behavioral qualities Kyndryl expects in a ServiceNow consulting role? I would demonstrate client focus by translating technical choices into business outcomes, such as faster restoration or safer changes. I take ownership of issues, communicate risks early, and collaborate respectfully across Kyndryl teams and client stakeholders. I protect credentials and sensitive data, follow governance, and challenge unsafe shortcuts. When requirements change, I adapt while preserving platform standards. I also measure results and share lessons, because consulting value comes from sustainable improvement, not merely completing configuration tasks. Make sure to cover client empathy, ownership, collaboration, clear communication, ethical handling of access and data, adaptability, continuous learning, measurable outcomes, and balancing standardization with client needs. If you are still with us, congratulations, you are much ahead of the rest and serious about preparing for your interview. We hope we were able to add value to your preparation and create some helpful content. Do not forget to like and share this video. Your small act can do great things for us.